Brightest blessings to you on this day. I am Davrine, your co-paid and we will talk about discernment. We have seen much discussion in your circles of how some people feel things in your circles have gotten off track. These people say things, and we do not mean to single out anyone. The reason why we bring this up is not because we see one person do it, but we see many. We see this as a common phenomenon. So we do not wish to appear we are singling out people. We notice that people throw the label of their cabal at anything that does not seem to jive with their perspective. And while we do encourage discernment, there is a big difference between discernment and passing judgment. It is a very big difference. Many people look at certain viewpoints and view them in relation to their own viewpoints, which is not necessarily bad, but when you deem that your viewpoint is the only valid viewpoint, that's where discernment becomes judgment. And this is not to say that personal experience has no value. Personal experience has very much a whole lot of value. However, it cannot serve to help anyone to go about throwing around the label of dark being simply because they do not agree with you. So many people talk about the thing they call Christ consciousness. And some people tend to use that term to divide and not to bring together. But we would say that in your stories, the man you know as Jesus Christ, he hung around with sinners. He did not hang around with sinners to make himself look better. He did not hang around with sinners to say, I am so much greater than you. Look at how great I am. Now please crawl back under your rock. He hung around with them to let them know that there was another level they could reach. That they could become better. That they weren't scum by default. Simply, it's... And an ascended master does not come to a place simply to say how much he cannot stand them and how much little hope there is for them. Consider this. Another thing that was made mention was the topic of how people use the phrase commanders and princesses to describe their star origins. We make no judgment on this. However, some people have expressed the concern that this is mainly ego-driven. And maybe in some cases this may be the case. In some cases maybe there is something there. To first start off, in higher density societies, royalty and commandership is not looked upon the same way as it is on Earth. On Earth, a commander is someone who commands others. In the higher realms, a commander is one who commands themselves. Discipline. Who commands himself to follow the path of joy and delight. And royalty is not looked upon like it is here as the illuminated elite of guarding or shepherding unwashed masses. This is not the case. In the higher densities, royalty is eldership. It's guidance. It's not looked upon the same there as it is in here. The main issue we see here is that people tend to use third density perspective to describe, to try to understand fifth density things. And we realize this is a step in the learning process, and there is no judgment. But try to understand that it is not all, that there are concepts that don't quite translate clearly, and we hope to elaborate on them so that there is less misunderstanding. Another way to look at this is that on your planet we notice that royalty will send their children to schools to understand diplomacy and leadership. This is a common thing on your planet. And I could think of no better place for royalty and commanders to go to learn diplomacy and how to work around difficult situations than to be sent to such a conflicted planet with so many difficult things going on at once. There is a reason why I do not talk too much about my home planet, or what goes on there, or how it is like on this blog. This is because this information tends to be used as a political device in many circles, so we have noticed. Well, this society does it that way, and they are on a higher density, therefore that is the only way to do it. Or this society abhors sex and it is higher density, so therefore sex is bad. There are many civilizations that take their path, and that is their path. But it may not be your path. When we discuss when we do discuss our society to you, when we share things about ourselves to you, this is not to imply that this is the only way to handle situations. Usually, we do this to offer a perspective, and oftentimes, sharing these things with you, there is an underlying lesson in it. It does not necessarily mean that you have to take on a government like ours or an alphabet like ours and suddenly you are instantly enlightened. That is not the point. This is not what we wish to convey. There are plenty of civilizations out there who either choose to live in what you might call a physical form, or would take on a physical form in order to experience sexuality. And there is nothing wrong with that. There is no judgment. There are some societies out there who choose not to, and that is okay too. This does not. This whole concept of sex being dirty is promulgated by this thing you would call dark cabal. The concept is the actual act in itself is natural. It is an expression of. It can be an expression of unity. And yes, some people find it relaxing. There is nothing wrong with that. To sit there and say wholesale that sexuality is somehow disconnected with higher expressions among all races implies a homogeneity that cannot exist in a universe that has created different expressions of itself to experience different aspects of source. If everything was like some of the information out there says that all star races somehow comply with this one single way of life, there would only be one life form out there to experience that, because having all these different life forms experiencing the same experience is redundant.